Dr. Elias Vaughn was no ordinary scientist. He was a man driven by curiosity and kindness. On this day, he stood on the rocky surface of an unknown planet, far from Earth and human colonies. His mission was to study the strange plants and animals here, but what he found was something no one expected. The sun was low in the sky, painting the dusty hills orange and red. Elias checked his equipment and scanned the area. Sensors had picked up a faint heartbeat nearby. He followed the signal, carefully moving toward a cluster of large rocks. There, lying on the ground, was a figure unlike any Elias had seen before. She was tall and graceful, with smooth skin that shimmered slightly under the fading light. Her long hair was the color of deep space, dark and glowing faintly. Eyes closed and pale, held a strange beauty even in pain. Elias's heart quickened. The woman was hurt badly. Her breathing was shallow, and her body was covered with cuts and bruises. She wore armor that looked both ancient and high-tech. A bow with glowing arrows lay beside her. Elias did not hesitate. He took out his medkit and knelt beside her. "I will help you," he whispered, more to himself than anyone else. He carefully checked her wounds and started cleaning them. Suddenly, she opened her eyes. They were sharp, full of fire and life. But they were also filled with fear and confusion. She tried to sit up, but pain stopped her. "Wait," Elias said softly. "You're safe now. I won't hurt you." The alien woman looked at him, studying his face. She did not speak, but Elias felt a strong presence, something proud, something fierce. He wondered what kind of world she came from. "Can you tell me your name?" he asked gently. After a long pause, she spoke in a language he could not understand. Then she closed her eyes again, exhausted. Elias frowned. He hoped she could understand him better soon. Elias worked through the night. Using his portable scanner and medical tools, he treated her wounds as best he could. He sent a message to his ship, asking for help and supplies. His crew warned him not to take risks with unknown aliens. But Elias's kindness would not let him turn away. As the hours passed, the woman slowly regained strength. Her breathing became steady, and she opened her eyes again. This time Elias saw something new, a spark of trust. "Kayla," she said quietly, this time in a voice Elias could understand. "I am Kayla," Elias smiled. "I'm Elias. I am a scientist from Earth." Kayla looked at him closely. "Why did you save me?" Elias thought for a moment. "Because no one should die alone." Because all life is important." Kayla nodded. Slowly. "You are ... kind." "Yes," Elias said. "Kindness is our strength." The planet's strange night sky stretched above them, full of stars and mysteries. Elias felt hope rising. He knew this was only the beginning of something much bigger. Kayla's story began to unfold. She was a huntress from a warrior tribe called the Jira. Her people were known across galaxies for their skill and beauty. But now, her world was in danger. Kayla had been on a mission to find help when she was attacked. Elias listened carefully, fascinated by her tales of distant planets and fierce battles. He wanted to help her and learn more. He was sure that humanity's future depended on making friends, not enemies, in the vast universe. But danger was not far behind. Kayla's enemies were searching for her, and Elias's decision to save her would put them both at risk. That night, as the cold wind swept the planet's surface, Elias watched over Kayla. He felt a strange connection to this alien huntress, a bond born not of blood, but of trust and kindness. Whatever came next. Elias knew one thing for sure. Saving Kayla was the right choice. The days that followed were filled with a quiet tension. The rocky landscape around Elias's small research outpost felt more isolated than ever. He knew the risks he had taken when he decided to help Kayla, but now there was no turning back. She was awake, recovering, but still weak from her injuries. The Huntress's fierce pride was evident in the way she held herself. But even she could not deny the toll her wounds had taken. Elias moved around his lab with ease, organizing the supplies he had sent for. The planet was rich in rare minerals, but few of them were useful for medical treatment. Still, Elias had managed to make do. He was good at adapting. His medical training, combined with his knowledge of alien species, had allowed him to keep Kayla alive. That was a small victory. Kayla lay on the cot, staring at the ceiling. Her eyes were wide, alert, but there was no sign of the fierceness she had shown when first waking. She had been quiet for hours, her expression unreadable. Elias knew she was recovering physically at least, but her mind seemed elsewhere. He cleared his throat and moved toward her. "How do you feel?" Kayla turned her head slowly, meeting his gaze. "Weak," she said. Her voice was soft, but there was an edge to it. "I should be able to fight. I should be hunting." Leah smiled gently. "You'll get there. But for now, you need rest. Let your body heal." She didn't reply immediately, as if weighing his words. Her alien features, tall, elegant, and almost ethereal, looked fragile now. It was hard for Elias to imagine the kind of warrior she had been before, the deadly hunter who could have easily killed any number of enemies. But he didn't say that. He knew better than to remind her of her weakness. "Where are they?" she asked suddenly, her voice sharp. Elias paused, sensing the change in her tone. "Who?" "The ones who hurt me," Kayla said, sitting up slightly, wincing from the pain. "The ones who follow me, I know they are coming." Elias felt a chill run down his spine. He had already known this. He had suspected it from the moment Kayla had first spoken of her enemies. But hearing her say it out loud made it real. "Still out there," Elias said, trying to sound calm. "We'll figure something out. You're not alone now, Kayla." She eyed him carefully, as though trying to gauge whether he truly meant it. Finally, she nodded, though the suspicion remained in her gaze. "I have no reason to trust you," she said quietly. "I am a warrior. I rely on myself, not on others." Elias. "Understood. I get it. Trust is earned, not given." For a long moment, they simply stared at each other, the silence stretching between them. Finally, Kayla broke the silence. "Why did you save me?" she asked, her voice quieter now. "You are human. You are not like me. You could have let me die." Elias paused, unsure how to answer at first. He wasn't used to explaining his motivations, but he knew this was important. She needed to understand. "I didn't save you because you're an alien or because you're beautiful," he said, choosing his words carefully. "I saved you because you were suffering. I couldn't just leave you there to die, because I believe every life is worth saving, no matter where it's from." Kayla considered this, her gaze softening ever so slightly. "You are strange for a human, but perhaps you are right. Perhaps." Elias chuckled lightly. "I'm not asking for your trust right now. I'm asking for your patience. Let me help you." Didn't reply, but Elias could see that his words had struck a chord. Kayla lay back down, staring up at the ceiling again. But this time, Elias noticed a faint flicker of curiosity in her eyes. It was a small change, but it meant something. The next few days passed in a slow, steady rhythm. Elias continued to care for Kayla, adjusting his treatment as her body healed. Her wounds began to close, and her energy returned bit by bit. She still didn't speak much, but she watched him intently, as though trying to understand him. She learned to trust him, if only a little at a time. One morning, as the two of them sat outside the outpost, Elias brought out a simple meal fruit, grains, and some protein supplements. He had spent time experimenting with the local plants. Finding safe and nutritious sources of food, Kayla studied the food for a long moment, clearly unfamiliar with it. She reached for a piece of fruit hesitantly, but then, without warning, her eyes snapped to the horizon. Elias followed her gaze and saw a shadow in the distance, moving across the rocky landscape. At first, he thought it might be a native animal, but then he saw the shape more clearly. It was a ship, sleek and fast, cutting through the sky with a purpose. Kayla's body tensed. She stood up, her hand instinctively going to the weapon she had carried when Elias first found her. "No," Elias said quickly, standing as well. "Not them. It's just a scout ship from my crew. I called for help." She lowered her hand, but kept her eyes on the ship. "Are they trustworthy?" Kayla asked, still wary. "Yes," Elias said firmly. "They've been with me for years. They won't harm you." Kayla was silent for a long moment. Elias could almost feel the weight of her thoughts. Finally, she spoke. "Why? Don't need their help. I only need mine," she said. But there was a softening in her voice, a hint of something else. Elias smiled. "You'll be stronger with help, trust me." Kayla said nothing, but as the ship approached, Elias couldn't shake the feeling that their story was only just beginning. The day after the scout ship landed, Elias felt a strange sense of unease. Though the ship's crew was friendly, their arrival only served to remind him of the danger that still lingered. Kayla's enemies were out there somewhere, hunting her. And it wasn't just a threat to her, it was a threat to everything Elias had worked for. The crew had set up camp near the research outpost, loading supplies and exchanging news. They seemed unfazed by the alien landscape, but Elias could tell they were curious about the mysterious woman lying inside. Kayla, for her part, remained in the shadows, watching them through the window. She was still wary of the human crew. Despite the medical treatment they had provided her, Elias knew he needed to speak to her. He stepped inside the small cabin where Kayla was resting, her dark eyes sharp as she observed him. "I'm going to have to tell them about you," Elias said softly. "They're here to help. They'll understand. But if you keep hiding, they'll only get suspicious." Kayla stared at him for a moment before slowly nodding. "I don't trust them," she said, her voice flat. "I don't trust anyone but myself," Elias sighed. "I know, but I can't protect you on my own. They've got weapons, knowledge of the terrain, and extra supplies. We'll need them if we're going to survive." "I survived on my own before," Kayla replied, her tone sharp. "I don't need their help. Or yours." Elias hesitated. He had expected this. Kayla was proud, perhaps too proud. But she was also alone, stranded far from her people, and the threats she faced were far bigger than the two of them. "We need to plan. Together," he said. "We need to face what's coming. If you let me help you, we might just make it." For a long moment, Kayla said nothing. Then she looked up at him, her expression softening slightly. "You've single quotes for ... different," she said quietly. "You don't think like others?" Elias smiled, though. "It was brief. I try not to." Later that evening, after the crew finished their work, Elias and Kayla met in the small common area. The crew members were busy going over their findings from the planet, but Elias knew the real danger was much closer than any of them realized. "We need to talk," Elias said to Kayla, his voice low. She nodded and followed him outside, the cool air of the alien planet brushing against their skin. The research base was surrounded by jagged rocks and barren land, but Elias had set up various sensors to keep watch over the area. He hoped they would give them enough warning if anything or anyone was coming. "I think it's time we talked about your enemies," Elias began. Kayla stiffened. "You don't need to know about them." "I think I do," Elias insisted. "They're dangerous, aren't they?" Kayla was silent for a long time, her sharp gaze scanning the horizon. Finally she spoke. "They are called the Zelrai," she said, her voice low and full of bitterness. "They're a mercenary faction, merciless in their pursuit of power, and they kill without hesitation. I was sent to stop them, but..." She trailed off, her voice faltering for the first time. Elias felt a pang of sympathy. "What do they want with you?" "They want to stop me," Kayla said, her fists clenching. "I'm part of a rebellion, a movement to free my people from their control. The Zelrai will do anything to keep us in chains, even if it means killing everyone who stands in their way." Elias took a deep breath. Out. He could see now just how serious the situation was. This wasn't just about helping a wounded alien. This was about stopping a threat that could spread far beyond this planet. "I won't let them hurt you," Elias said firmly. "We'll fight together. I've got a few tricks up my sleeve, but we'll need to be smart." Kayla raised an eyebrow, clearly intrigued. "What kind of tricks?" Elias grinned. "I'm human. We might not be as strong or as fast as you, but we're good at improvising." The next day, Elias and Kayla worked together, setting traps and preparing for the worst. Elias shared his knowledge of technology with Kayla, teaching her how to modify some of the outpost's equipment into improvised weapons. In return, Kayla taught Elias some basic combat techniques, how to defend himself, how to use the terrain to his advantage. though it was clear she still didn't fully trust him. There was a respect in her actions that hadn't been there before. They had just finished setting up a series of motion detectors when Elias heard something faint in the distance. Low, steady, and getting closer. He turned to Kayla, his eyes wide. "They're here." Kayla didn't hesitate. She grabbed her bow and knocked an arrow, her body moving with the grace of a predator. Elias quickly grabbed his sidearm, a basic energy weapon, and joined her at the edge of the outpost. They both stood still, listening to the approaching sound. It wasn't just a single ship anymore. There were multiple signatures coming their way. The Zelrai were closing in. "We've got a few minutes before they reach the outpost," Elias said, his mind racing. "We need to take them out before they land," Kayla nodded. "We'll use the traps. They won't expect a fight." Elias's mind worked quickly. He knew Kayla was right. They had the advantage of surprise, but they couldn't afford to waste it. "I'll take the high ground," Elias said. "You handle the ground level?" Kayla gave him a sharp, approving glance. "We'll do this together." As the hum of the approaching ships grew louder, Elias and Kayla moved into position, ready to face the Zelrai and protect the fragile alliance that had formed between them. The threat was real now, but Elias had no doubt they could hold their ground. The moment Elias and Kayla took their positions, the air seemed to shift. A strange stillness fell over the research outpost. The distant hum of the Zelrai ships grew louder with each passing second, the sound vibrating through the ground beneath them. The two of them stood side by side, ready for whatever was coming. Kayla's dark eyes were fixed on the horizon, her bow held steady in her hands. She seemed calm, as though the threat of death didn't bother her at all. Elias, on the other hand, could feel his heart pounding in his chest. He had faced danger before, but this was different. Kayla wasn't just any alien. She was a warrior, and she had a life and a people to protect. Elias was fighting for something more than just survival now. He was fighting for her, his unexpected ally. The first ship finally broke through the clouds, descending slowly toward the ground. It was sleek and black, with sharp angles that reflected the light of the alien sun. The ship was clearly built for battle, a silent predator of the stars. The other ships followed closely behind, their engines roaring as they made their descent. "We'll need to move quickly," Elias said, keeping his voice low. "The motion detectors are working, but we don't have long." Kayla gave a single nod, her face as hard as stone. "They will come for me. I will be ready." Elias couldn't help but admire her strength. He'd seen her struggle in her recovery, but now she was nothing short of a deadly force. It was strange to think that just a few days ago, she had been unconscious and weak in his care. Now she was ready to face her enemies. Elias took a deep breath and focused. He wasn't a warrior like Kayla, but he was resourceful. The traps they'd set were simple but effective. A few detonators hidden in the ground linked to the motion sensors. When triggered, they would release a barrage of energy bolts, enough to disable the ships, or at least slow them down. Kayla had insisted on using her bow and arrows, which were laced with a bioelectrical toxin that could disable enemies with a single hit. She wasn't one for overcomplicated tactics. She believed in simplicity and precision. The first ship landed, its engines hissing as they powered down. The door opened with a mechanical groan, revealing figures in black armor, tall, menacing, and carrying weapons that looked deadly even from a distance. They moved quickly, scanning the area for signs of their quarry. Kayla raised her bow and aimed at the closest figure. Elias was already at the switch for the traps. Took one last look at Kayla, meeting her gaze. Shh. For a brief moment, their eyes locked. She didn't need to say anything. They both understood what needed to be done. With a sharp movement, Kayla let the first arrow fly. It zipped through the air, striking the leader of the mercenaries in the shoulder. The man grunted, staggering back, his weapon falling from his grip. Before he could recover, Kayla knocked another arrow and fired, this time at the man closest to him. The arrow hit its mark, and the man fell to the ground, twitching in pain as the toxin took effect. Elias pushed the button. The ground beneath them rumbled as the traps activated. A series of energy bolts shot up from the earth, striking the ships. The first ship, the one that had landed, sparked and shuddered, its engines short-circuiting. The mercenaries shouted in confusion as the bolts hit their armor, disrupting their systems. Kayla didn't wait for them to recover. She was already moving, her lithe body gliding through the rocky terrain with deadly precision. Cover to cover, her movements almost too fast to follow. Another arrow flew from her bow, hitting one of the mercenaries in the chest. He collapsed, unable to stand against the force of the strike. Elias watched in awe, his hands still gripping the button that controlled the traps. But Kayla didn't need him to fight her battles. She was a force of nature, unstoppable and fierce. The mercenaries regrouped, pulling back toward the ships. They were trying to retreat, but Elias could see that their confidence was shaken. Hadn't expected such a coordinated attack. They had underestimated Kayla, and they had underestimated him. Kayla appeared from behind a pile of rocks, her bow ready for another shot. This time, Elias moved forward, stepping into the open, his weapon drawn. "Stay back," he shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos. "Don't let them get away." The remaining mercenaries hesitated, glancing between Kayla and Elias. They were clearly outmatched. One of them, the leader, stepped forward, raising his hands in a gesture of surrender. "This isn't over," he said, his voice cold. "You can't hide forever." Kayla's eyes flashed with anger, but Elias stepped forward, keeping his weapon trained on the mercenary. "It is for you," Elias said firmly. "Leave now." For a moment, the mercenary leader didn't move, as if weighing his options. But then he nodded, signaling for the others to retreat. They moved quickly, climbing into their ships and taking off into the sky, leaving behind a trail of dust. Elias lowered his weapon, his heart still racing. Kayla stood beside him, breathing heavily, but there was no joy in her eyes. She had won the battle, but the war wasn't over. "Thank you," she said quietly, her voice rough with exhaustion. Elias glanced at her, surprised. "You don't need to thank me. We made it out because of you," she nodded, but her gaze was distant, as if she was already thinking about the next fight. "This was only a small victory. They will come again, and when they do, I will be ready." Elias felt a strange, unfamiliar feeling stir inside him. It wasn't fear. It was something else. A connection. Something that told him he couldn't walk away from this. Not now. Not after everything they had been through together. "Whatever happens," Elias said, his voice firm, "we face it together." Kayla looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. Together. For the first time since their fight began, Elias felt a sense of peace. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them side by side. And together they just might win. The days that followed were quiet, too quiet for Elias's comfort. The mercenaries had retreated, but Kayla was on edge. She spent most of her time outside, scanning the horizon, her keen eyes never still. Elias could see the weight on her shoulders, the burden of a warrior who had never known peace. She was preparing for the next fight, even though no one knew when it would come. Elias, on the other hand, was trying to make the best of their situation. He had a few projects he wanted to complete for the research outpost, and he kept busy with his work, but the quiet nagged at him too. Every time he looked over at Kayla, he couldn't help but feel that something was about to change, something big. Kayla rarely spoke about her past, but Elias noticed little things. The way she sometimes gazed at the sky as if she were searching for something, or perhaps remembering something lost. He had tried to ask her about it once, but she had closed off instantly, her sharp eyes warning him not to press further. They were sitting in the small outdoor area that Elias had cleared of debris, watching the sunset. The colors in the sky were unlike anything Elias had ever seen, deep shades of purple, orange, and red blending together as the alien sun dipped below the horizon. "It's beautiful here," Elias remarked, breaking the silence. Kayla didn't reply immediately. She was still looking toward the distant hills, her jaw set, as though she were waiting for something to happen. "I've seen many sunsets," she said, her voice soft but firm, "but none like this." Elias smiled faintly. "You've traveled." "Far, I have," Kayla replied, "but not by choice. I was born to fight." Elias turned his head to study her face, trying to understand her words. He didn't know much about her homeworld, but he could tell she was carrying more than just the physical scars of her past. She had the look of someone who had seen too much, who had lost too much. You don't have to keep fighting, Elias said carefully. Not here. You don't need to be alone anymore. Kayla finally turned to him, her eyes sharp. There was a flicker of something, curiosity, perhaps, or something deeper, but she didn't say anything. Instead, she stood up, her posture proud. But weary? I will never stop fighting, Kayla said, almost to herself. It is who I am. Elias watched her, unsure of what to say. He could see that there was no changing her mind, at least not yet. But in the silence that stretched between them, something shifted. Elias didn't push her any further. He simply stayed by her side, letting her work through whatever battle she was fighting within herself. The next morning, the peacefulness of the outpost was shattered by the sound of a low rumble. Elias felt it in his chest before he heard it, the unmistakable sound of approaching ships. Kayla was already on her feet, her hand going instinctively to her weapon, her face hardening into that familiar warrior's mask. Elias, too, reached for his sidearm. This time, however, the enemy wasn't just coming for Kayla. This time, they were coming for both of them. They're back, Elias said, his voice tight with tension. I know, Kayla replied simply, her eyes scanning the terrain. The ships were coming in fast, and from the look of it, there were more this time, dozens of them. Elias quickly assessed their options. The outpost was too exposed. They couldn't stay here. We need to move, he said urgently, already pulling out a small map of the surrounding area. There's a cave system not far from here. We can hide, regroup, and plan our next move. Kayla didn't argue. She nodded once, then turned. Already moving toward the edge of the outpost, the two of them raced through the rocky terrain, heading for the cave system that Elias had discovered on a previous survey. They needed to be quick. They couldn't afford to waste time. As they ran, Elias couldn't help but glance at Kayla. There was something about her now that he hadn't seen before. A mixture of determination and something else. Something softer. Her trust in him had grown in the last few days. It wasn't much, but it was enough to make Elias believe that they might actually survive this. Together, by the time they reached the cave, the first of the mercenary ships was almost upon them. They scrambled inside, barely managing to avoid being spotted. Elias activated a small sensor, dimming the lights inside the cave and shutting down all the equipment he could to make it appear abandoned. Kayla was already in her element, scanning the entrance for any sign of movement. Her body was tense, alert. She was a warrior to the core. Elias sat back against the wall, breathing heavily. They were safe, for now. But how long would it last? Do you think they'll find us here? He asked, trying to steady his breath. Kayla was silent for a moment. Before she answered, they will look, but they won't find us. Not if we stay hidden. Elias nodded, but he knew the truth. They weren't safe yet. The Zelrai were ruthless, and they had likely already started to search the planet for them. They couldn't stay in the cave forever. Can't outrun them forever, Elias said, his voice grim. We need to face them. Kayla turned to him. Her gaze sharp. We will. But on our terms, not theirs. Elias looked at her, his heart pounding. How? Her lips curled into a faint, almost amused smile. I will give them a choice. He didn't need to ask what she meant. He understood. Kayla wasn't just going to fight them. She was going to make them regret ever coming for her. And if they wouldn't back down, she would make them pay. The cave was silent except for the faint sound of Ilias's breathing and the occasional distant rumble of the approaching ships. The shadows inside the cave seemed to stretch on forever, a dark contrast to the glowing horizon outside. Running out. Every passing minute felt like a countdown. Elias sat with his back pressed against the cold stone wall, his weapon gripped tightly in his hand. Beside him, Kayla moved with practiced precision, setting up a few last-minute defenses and preparing herself for what was to come. She was calm, but Elias could see the tension in her posture, the way her eyes darted from one shadow to another. Her focus was razor-sharp. But there was something else, something he hadn't seen before. It was the weight of the past, heavy, in the way she held herself, and the quiet determination that told Elias she wasn't just fighting for survival anymore. She was fighting for something much bigger. They had no more time to waste. The mercenaries were closing in, and soon they would discover the cave's hidden entrance. Elias had no doubt they would find it. They always did. But for now, they still had the advantage of surprise. "I can hear them," Elias whispered, trying to control his nerves. Kayla didn't answer immediately. She was looking down at the small scanner she had set up, her fingers moving over it with incredible speed. It showed a large cluster of red dots, mercenaries, moving fast, getting closer. But then her finger paused over one particular dot. "There." "Splitting up," Kayla said, her voice steady but laced with urgency. "They know we're here. They're preparing to search the whole area." Elias felt his stomach twist. "We need to stop them before they split up." Kayla nodded, but she didn't seem worried. "We will. I've fought worse." Elias felt a chill at her words. He knew Kayla had seen things done, things that would haunt most people. But now, more than ever, he could sense the deep, unspoken bond between them. It wasn't just about the fight anymore. It was about protecting each other, and Kayla had chosen to trust him, even if only just a little. "Listen, Elias," Kayla said, turning to face him. "When they come for us, we can't let them divide us. We need to stick together. You need to watch my back, and I'll watch yours." Nodded, his mouth dry. "You can count on me." Kayla gave him a quick, sharp look, almost like a smile, but it was gone too fast for Elias to be sure. "I always do." They moved quickly, setting up the last few traps around the entrance of the cave. Elias could hear the faint hum of the ships as they hovered just above the ground, preparing to land. The mercenaries were near, and Kayla was ready. "There's no turning back now," Elias said, taking a deep breath. "I know," Kayla replied. "But that's the only way I've ever known how to live. Now we fight." Elias didn't have time to respond before the first mercenary stepped into view, his heavy boots crunching on the rocky ground. The man wore black armor, his weapon raised, scanning the area. Elias's heart beat loudly in his ears. The man stopped just outside the cave, his head tilting slightly as if sensing something was wrong. Kayla didn't wait. She moved first, silent as a shadow. Her bow was drawn, and before the mercenary had a chance to react, an arrow flew through the air. It struck the man in the chest, and he fell to the ground without a sound. Elias was quick to follow, raising his weapon and scanning for any other mercenaries. He had to keep his cool. He had to stay focused. The rest of the mercenaries were not far behind. Elias could hear their voices now low, steady commands being passed back and forth. "They were close. There's more of them," Kayla whispered. "Peeking around the corner of the cave entrance. They're coming in force. We need to keep them from entering the cave." Elias could feel the adrenaline surging through him now. He'd never been in a battle like this before. He was used to solving problems with his mind, not with a gun in his hand. But here, with Kayla by his side, it felt different. The mercenaries moved in fast, firing shots into the shadows. Kayla was already moving, darting in and out of cover like a ghost. Another arrow flew, and another mercenary fell. Elias didn't hesitate. He took aim and fired, hitting the closest enemy in the shoulder. The mercenary grunted, stumbling backward, but he was still alive. Elias didn't wait for him to recover. He took another shot, this time hitting the mercenary in the chest. The man dropped, his weapon skidding across the ground. "That's sharp," Kayla called, already repositioning herself to take another shot. Elias followed her lead. Watching the other mercenaries closely, they were becoming more cautious now, moving in a tighter formation. It was clear they were preparing for a direct assault. "They're trying to outflank us," Elias said, his voice tight with tension. "We can't let them get around the back." "I've got it," Kayla replied, her voice calm but firm. "I'll cover the rear." Without another word, she darted off into the shadows, leaving Elias to hold the front. Took a deep breath, forcing his mind to stay clear as the mercenaries closed in. He had to stay focused. He couldn't afford to miss. The first mercenary to appear was faster than Elias had anticipated. The man raised his weapon, aiming straight for Elias. But before he could fire, Kayla appeared from behind him, an arrow in her bow. She let it Fly, and the man crumpled to the ground. The remaining mercenaries hesitated, clearly realizing they were facing more resistance than they had anticipated. But they didn't give up. They pushed forward, determined to breach the cave. Elias fired. Again, striking another mercenary in the leg. The man fell, unable to continue the assault. But still they came. There were only a few left now. Elias could see the fear in their eyes. They were outnumbered. They were outmatched. They knew it. Kayla appeared by his side once more, her eyes flashing with the thrill of battle. "We've got this," she said, and for the first time Elias truly believed it.